welcome back to Front Court. I was undefined with working on myself. Feel free to stream them on Spotify, Apple Music, Google Play.
Do it, stream them.
You know, I hear they're pretty lit. I know the lead singer, he's a cool dude.
Yeah, I mean, from what I know, the lead singer is just an absolute babe magnet from what I've heard.
I heard he's so
Sources
cool.
can confirm.
Anywho, so backcourt to front court, the NBA podcast made for fans by fans. I'm Ezra Smith. I'll be the backcourt today. It's been a
Finally.
wee bit. Yeah, finally. I'm just pretty busy sometimes. So I'll be leading the discussion. Addition to Everett, who's our front court. Everett, how's it going?
You know, it is going fantastic. I am happy to be here with number 4. Let's get it.
Number 4. That means it's almost been like a month.
You know what we haven't talked about? What's your number? Your basketball number?
Oh, I'm 13.
What did you wear? You're 13.
Well, I would have
11.
worn 13, but was 13.
Wow,
So I wore.
I'm gonna have to bleep that out now.
So I wore 10.
So your number got stolen by the first string point guard because you were the third string point guard.
Yeah, I'm the Los Angeles Lakers version of Steve Nash. I'm number 10.
Number 10. I guess that works. I was number 11 because I always thought, because I'm so tall, I was like, you stack 1 and 1 on top of each other, and that makes the tallest number. That was literally my logic in first grade when I decided to pick number 11. And it was my sister's number.
That's genius.
It's brilliant. I was ahead of my time.
Okay. So, if you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you're not new, if you're returning, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you for actually watching a second one.
Yeah, thanks, Mom.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mom and me, I think. So we're going to start things out the way we usually do with the weekly roundup, kind of recap how this week has been going, first week of April. So Tuesday, Russell Westbrook had the historic 2020-21 game. He's the second player, to do that ever since Wilt Chamberlain, back when he was averaging 50 boards a game and all.
Yeah, I'm just gotta say it's crazy. 2020 and 21. I didn't look at his production for that game or his efficiency, because that's typically what tells the tale with Westbrook, is whether or not his efficiency was up or not, because he can get great stats but have garbage efficiency.
Yeah.
But still, efficiency, good or not, those numbers are awesome. Good on him. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy time to kind of watch the NBA. I think it's the best it's been in the last couple of years. So Steph gets contacts to kind of break out of his sub 37% shooting slump. I put slump in quotations because it's below 37%. Even shooting 35% is considered good for your normal 3-and-D players. But for Steph, if he's shooting below 40, he's in a slump. But
he's in a slump, right?
He's got contacts now. Patrick Mahomes sent out a tweet. He's been doing all this with blurry vision, which I think is hilarious because blurry and Curry.
Can you imagine the fact that this whole time he's just been going, that looks like the hoop, and just shooting the ball towards it? That is ridiculous.
He didn't want to end up shooting threes, or that's the reason why he shoots them from so far away. He thinks he's a lot closer. He's all like, I think I'm there. Go.
Then next year he's gonna say, "Oh yeah, I got surgery because I've been blind in my right eye this whole time." So his depth perception has been off. So he's been shooting.
Actually, I've had a prosthetic hand this entire time. This hand's not even real. So, also
I wouldn't put it past him.
Seriously. Also on Tuesday, the Wizards fired their longtime president Ernie Grunfeld after 16 seasons. Yeah, I don't know who that is because the Wizards are garbage. So
I'm surprised that they had a president for that long. Yeah.
How do you last that long when they've been terrible for so long?
Well, it's not just that they're terrible; it's that they've been so hot and cold for so long. They've had John Wall for forever, and I remember them being 4th seed one year, and then being the 10th seed the next year, and all sorts. I think it was 2 years ago in the East where it was Wizards versus, I think, Celtics that went to Game 7, and it was really exciting. and then all of a sudden they were like 10th seed the next year, and they're just so up and down.
Live and Die by John Wall.
Real quick, what does the president do? For people that don't know, what does the president of these teams do?
President of basketball operations, really, I think they're kind of like the owner in that they have say over everything, but they're more involved, right? Because obviously the owner's a billionaire. They have a lot of other things that they're doing. I think the president is in charge of basketball, so like hiring and firing of GMs, coaches, and whatnot, but they don't technically own the team. I just think it's like a step below, in my mind at least. Because like how involved Magic Johnson is and everything.
Mm-hmm. Next week we're gonna. My next topic next week is gonna be about. We're gonna run down all the roles that the office, the front office and back office, and all of them have, so that fans can understand who these roles are. But yeah, keep going. I'm interrupting too much.
So Wednesday, the Sixers signed Greg Monroe. I mean, whoop-de-doo. Can he play in the playoffs for them, or is this signing too late? I can't remember. I thought there was like some sort of limit on when you can sign a player and they can still be playoff eligible.
I'm not sure.
Maybe I'm
keep going.
Maybe I'm just crazy. So CJ McCollum is doing 3-on-3 drills. He traveled with the team this week, so that's looking good for Portland fans.
He's supposed to play tonight.
Ooh. That's
exciting.
He's
playing against the Nuggets, but the Nuggets are resting their entire like starting lineup anyways. So
yeah, it's the weird week of basketball. Anthony Davis flips off a fan. Don't know if you saw that. He got a $15,000 fine. Oh no, that really hurts the bank account when you're a millionaire.
And it spilled out of his pockets, and he went, "Oh, here it is," and handed it over.
He's like, "Okay, whatever."
Yeah.
In the Spurs-Nuggets game, Popovich was ejected 63 seconds into the game. And then he goes into Mike Malone's presser after the game to ask what went on because he couldn't be there. That was a pretty funny video to watch. Just crazy. Like 63 seconds and you're already out. Like, what do you have to do to take off a ref that much?
I know. Yeah. I think a lot of it was on the ref. Because if you watch the video, the first tech wasn't called for. It was Popovich getting angry, which as a ref you expect that, you know. The second one made sense because Popovich pursued him onto the floor, so that's obviously going to be a T immediately. But first one was uncalled for. First one shouldn't have been given out, but it happens.
Yeah. Thursday, the Bucks clinched the best record in the NBA with their win over the 76ers, so they've secured home court advantage throughout all of the playoffs that they are involved in. Triple B is over. LeVar's looking for a new super agent that can get all his sons on one team, but Lonzo has come out saying that he is selecting his own agent. I really like that he's distancing himself from LeVar. I think it's great.
Smart.
I'm really happy that this whole Triple B thing's dying. I think it's going to be great for Lonzo, great for the Lakers. I'm excited. Not biased at all.
It's a very smart move for Lonzo. We talked about, I think, a couple episodes ago about young players and that transition to the NBA and how business decisions are tough when you're young, but he's pretty smart to try to distance himself from his dad in the business world. You know, LeVar makes his business off of controversy, and so Lonzo needs to get away from that. You know, maybe one day Lonzo and what's the younger brother's name? The youngest one?
The youngest one is LaMelo.
Since those two are the only ones that are going to make it to the NBA, if LaMelo even does. I don't know. I've not heard anything about LaMelo for months.
He's going to go play in either Australia or China because all this talk was like
play college basketball.
He can't. Because he had the shoe deal and he played in Lithuania. He's not amateur anymore. So he can't play in the NCAA. So that's why it was so weird when Bleacher Report was like, "Where do you think LaMelo is going to go to college?" And I was like, "He's not going to go anywhere." Because he can't. Bleacher Report, exactly. Come on. But yeah.
That has hurt him. That's going to hurt him so much. That's just going to hurt him so much. You can't. Rarely there's somebody who goes plays in Australia. We talked about this, I think, 2 episodes ago as well. Maybe last episode. Rarely does a player go play international and then go to the lottery unless they do stupid well. Especially if you go play in Australia or like China. you're not going in the lottery. If you're European playing in the Euroball and you do well, like Doncic, but you do stupid well, MVP, then you'll go lottery. But he hurt himself so much. That's his dad's fault. He should have gone and played college.
Yeah, the one thing he has going for himself is that he has a lot more attention than other European players, so he'll get a lot more scouts looking at him.
If he does,
but
he
also
does good, though.
Yeah, he also just has a dark cloud hanging over him because of his family.
Exactly. Well, the tough thing is, we talked about it. It's tougher competition over there. It's not college basketball. It's grown men playing. Exactly.
And he's a baby boy.
It is a gamble that he is taking, though he's being forced to take now because his dad made him go play in Lithuania. That is absolutely damaging to his career, because if he goes and plays grown men that he cannot sauce as well as the high schoolers he was playing against or college players that he could be playing against, his stock is going to drop dramatically.
Yeah, and I don't get the whole foreign situation. Like, why not just play for the G League? Like, why do you got to go European? Why do you got to go Euro? Just play in the G League. Play against other players who have played in the NBA.
Yeah, it's foolish, but that's LeVar. That's all him.
What can you do? You're an 18-year-old kid and your dad's in charge of you.
Do you know what I would do if I was LiAngelo? This would be a good move for LiAngelo.
I don't even know where he is.
No, he's still playing wherever LeVar goes. I'm pretty sure he goes. He's in LeVar's his league right now. You know how they have
that's stupid
junior league, the JVA he's in there right now. I'm pretty sure, but he should just stop playing basketball. Go get a degree in sports administration or sports finance, and then go be the agent for his brother, or go help go join Lonzo on his rise and benefit off of that. Not like your dad, make a new brand for you and your brothers and say screw your dad who's absolutely screwed you all.
Yeah, you knew it was a bad business model when they were selling $30 bottled water.
Yeah. Oh, hey, that goes into a topic that we're talking about today. I just realized.
All right. Anywho, so Friday it was reported that the salary cap's projected to kind of be lower than it has been in the 2020-2021 season. It'll be about $2 million cheaper. It's not, that big of a deal, and that's just a projection. It's not like the league's actively saying we're lowering it. It's just that's how the finances work. That was just really the only thing significant from Friday, I feel. But the season is winding down, right? So this is the last week of the regular season. So a lot of players, a lot of non-playoff teams especially, the Stars are done. On some playoff teams, the Stars are done. I know the Bucks are a team that we're not slowing down. Good for them. Get those 60 wins. But yeah, that's the weekly roundup. Anything else that you noticed throughout the week that I missed?
No, it's just since the season's winding down, teams are resting entire starting lineups. It's just it's a much slower part of the season as we're prepping for the playoffs. That's all that happened this week.
Yeah, because everything's pretty much set except for the lower seeds of the East. Because I don't know what just happened, but now they're all within a game of each other. Because it was pretty, they were all close, but it was pretty locked up who was in. Now even the Hornets are back in the chase. They're only a game and a half out. So we'll see how that closes out. But the West is pretty much set. It's just who's going to be the 8th seed, the Spurs or the Thunder.
Right. Well, the Heat have essentially they fell out of the race for a while, and now they're back in it. They dropped to the 10th seed for a while, I'm pretty sure, and I really hope the Heat make it. Yeah,
it was the Pistons, the Nets, and the Heat all just started doing terrible, and the Magic were here we go. Let's take advantage of this.
Although I would be really happy for the Magic. That's a team that nobody saw making the playoffs.
That'd be so weird. It'd be weird to have them in the playoffs. It's been
I'm surprised.
It's been 8 years or something.
Pistons are definitely the underplaying team right now. They should be doing so much better than they are.
Yeah, because they were killing it just a month ago. They were one of the best teams in the league.
They were doing really well.
Now they slump.
But we'll see they're slumping. That's what happens. And when you have I'm pretty sure when you have I don't know. I feel the Pistons, their play style is so hot and cold because they rely on two big men, and big men. When you rely on big men, I feel your wins go up and down. because
Yeah.
a bad night for a big man is different than a bad night for like a star point guard. You know.
And they've got like one of the streakiest point guards in the league in Reggie Jackson.
Yeah.
He is literally just a ice cube on fire. Just hot and cold. All right. So that's the weekly roundup.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're going to delve into our first topic, which is my topic, and I've titled it "It's a Business." You know, it's something that we hear around the NBA a lot.
It's a business.
Maybe you can pronounce it "It's a Business." You know, if you want a little culture, but so I just want to
hear around trade season. People,
Yeah.
whenever somebody gets traded, it's a businessman. You know, they always talk about that.
So I want to start out with just this general question. Everett, how big is loyalty in the NBA today?
How big is loyalty? Well, loyalty comes with production. You know, if a player can produce, then that's where loyalty, it meets it. You know, teams are only as loyal as a player is good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They are only going to match a player for their skill, and that's just a fact. You know. Now I think that there's outliers of that. You look at Nick Collison of the Thunder. There's things like that where you have players that they bring something else to the table, and so teams will be loyal to them.
Yeah, Udonis Haslem on the Heat.
Exactly. There is outliers to that, but a lot of times teams, their loyalty pretty much means they want to keep a good player. You know, is that player making the team money? Is that player helping the team? So it's important, but I would say it's not as big as it used to be. You know, I feel like in like the 80s and stuff, I feel like it hit an all-time low in the early 2000s, late 90s. Loyalty did, where like players could get. I shouldn't even say I should say just the 2000 era, like from 2000 to 2010 is where loyalty hit an all-time low.
It's a relatively new thing. This kind of lack of loyalty.
Right, and so I think it's on the rise back up because you have players who are saying, like, rings aren't important to me. You know, like, you know, people like Damian Lillard, Giannis Antetokounmpo, what used to be Devin Booker, saying things like they want to bring a ring to their cities. But again, I think it's not as much as it used to be in the 80s, maybe, where when a team selected you in a draft, you wanted to be with that team for as long as you could. But I think some of that comes with the fact that players also understand that they have more rights now than they used to, and that they have a say in how things go, especially the good ones. So as long as it's about it's reciprocal. If they're treating each other right, if they're paying enough and producing enough, then the team and the player will be loyal to each other.
I like that. Yeah, I like the use of reciprocal. It's almost like a symbiotic relationship, right? It's where you know, I scratch your back, you scratch mine, and I think that's the new thing of these 2000s is you know, it's less of, you know, we drafted you, welcome to the team, the fans love you. Now it's more of like, what are you going to do for me? If you help me, I'll help you. And so yeah, I think loyalty is definitely not as big a deal in people's minds as it was a while ago. Yeah.
Right. I think one thing as well is player intent, is the idea of what they expect to get out of basketball, because. And this isn't to dig on him at all, but you know Mike Conley. Even though they shopped him this trade season a little bit, Mike Conley isn't exactly a player that I would say is pursuing a ring, you know. But he's one of the highest paid players in the paid players in the NBA, and so because he's not so focused on the securing the ring, and he is okay with just making a good amount of money, I think that's where his loyalty comes from, because the Grizzlies are willing to pay him a lot of money to stay on the team, and he's okay with that. But then you have players like Anthony Davis, who even though he could have got a supermax contract, or can get a supermax contract still, he likely isn't going to, because he wants to win. You know, it's all about the intent of the player as well.
Yeah, so I was thinking of, you know, just some examples of kind of those loyal players that are kind of left in the NBA, like Nick Collison, Udonis Haslem. I would say Dame. I think Dame's a very loyal player. I think Steph Curry's a loyal player. Dirk, obviously. D Wade, even though there was that weird stint in Chicago. I mean, we all knew it was weird in that it didn't feel right.
And Cleveland.
Yeah. And so it was great when he came back. I think Russell Westbrook's a loyal player. I think he's kind of forced into that loyalty now, ever since KD left. Like, he can't leave. He can't leave this fan base, right, after what happened to them. And I think Kemba Walker is a loyal player, right? I think, and there might be doubts about this because maybe he'll go to the Knicks. If he stays, I mean, I think it's pretty cemented that he cares about Charlotte and he cares about that location. So those are just
I think
some of the people.
I agree with that. The Kemba Walker statement. I think he's at a crossroads right now where he has to decide. He has to make the call between loyalty or his I don't want to say his career, but loyalty or cementing himself as something greater.
Yeah, the dude never wins.
Exactly, and so and as we know, winning has a big impact on your legacy. And Kemba Walker is very good, but it's gonna come down to whether or not he wants to secure the bag, get another supermax contract on his next signing, or if he wants to go somewhere else and really pursue a championship, because that's really what it comes down to for these players. But we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. And the fact that he stayed this long is nice, is impressive, and I think that says at least a little bit about his loyalty.
Yeah. So I want to tackle this idea of loyalty from both sides, players and organizations. So I want to start with the players. So should a player be required to stay loyal to their draft team? Is that something that is forced upon them because this team happened to draft them?
I think it depends on how you were drafted. Imagine if you are a number one selected player, if you're projected to go number one and you're chosen number one, I don't think that really says a whole lot about your demand for loyalty because the team didn't make a hard decision to pick you.
Yeah.
You were the obvious choice because either A, you're going to produce for them and do well, or B, you're going to be trade bait and they're going to get something out of you. So that's zero risk for the team. And even if they select you out of their heart that they want you and they think you're going to be great for their city, regardless, there is zero risk for them. Oh, sorry. I mean, there's always risk in playing and selecting a player. I should say zero risk. But when you're projected number one and they select you, it's pretty obvious that they're not taking as big of a risk as they could. But if you're a player projected to go 15, 16, 17, and you get selected at 7, at 8, I think to a point that says something about the team and what they see in you, and that player should, if he does well in the future, if 3 years in at the end of his rookie contract, he's doing really well, and that he actually did turn out to be a really good player, I think that does say a lot about that. And I think the player should stay with the team because it said a lot about them that they chose you to produce and they saw something in you.
All right, so you're thinking that it is kind of when you get down to those levels where it's we could take this guy, right there when the team kind of chose you, that's where you should kind of feel almost indebted to that franchise.
Maybe not indebted they own you, but you should factor it in when you're making your decision, especially when you're a rookie. That's my thing. When you're about to sign your first contract outside the rookie contract, you're still a rookie. You're still young, and so it's okay if you're going to stay with another team that might be bad still. If in, let's say, 3 years, the Atlanta Hawks are still, I'm not going to say garbage, but they're still a struggling team. Maybe
say 42, 40
right.
wins.
And it comes down to whether or not what's his face, Trae Young, has to sign with them, but he could go to another team or something like that. I say he stays. This team, they made a trade for you. They traded Luka Doncic for you. They pursued you, and to a point, you don't owe something to the team, but you owe something to that city that has supported you. That's another thing too. If the city supports you, that's tough, especially if you're a breakout star like Trae Young is, and he's been doing really well, and the city loves him. That would be crazy to leave that, I think.
Yeah, some players I think of. So obviously, players who were drafted by teams and thus far into their careers, they haven't been met with much success. Anthony Davis, Devin Booker, Damian Lillard to a point. I mean, obviously he's made the playoffs almost every year of his career except for once. But I mean, it's been first round exits, occasional second round. Kemba Walker, I would even say Bradley Beal, John Wall, just players like that who were drafted, who are great players, who are all-stars, all-NBA caliber players, who just haven't been met with the success that you feel they deserve. And so at that point, do they deserve the opportunity to succeed? Should they be judged for wanting to leave a situation where they know they're not going to win?
Well, the tough thing is there's only so many teams that can, only one team can win every year.
Yeah.
So it's like, what are their options? If you're on a team I think there's a difference because I look at somebody like Anthony Davis last year or Damian Lillard currently, or Anthony Davis for quite a few years. Well, last year, Anthony Davis, he beat the Trailblazers in a sweep as the lower seed. His team was doing well, and then Damian Lillard as well, like you said, making it to the playoffs every year. I think you have to separate them from the Kemba Walker, Devin Booker, and John Walls, who are struggling with struggling teams. Because those teams that are winning, where can they go? You are a max contract player. There's only so few and far between teams that can sign you, first of all, and then so few and far between that will make something of you successfully.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I wouldn't judge the other guys who are on struggling teams as much, who aren't doing well. I wouldn't judge them for switching teams just for a change up, just to change it up. Because a lot of times you go to a team to just get a new thing, like a new scenery, maybe start again, maybe feel better about your career. That's why I wouldn't judge them. But the guys that are winning, I might, because they're already on a winning team. They have a chance to fight for a finals appearance, and it just comes down to them. Like it does. It comes down to when you're a star, it comes down to you producing for your team. And if you're the team star and you go to play for another team as their star, you've changed nothing. You're again just another star on a playoff caliber team. Congratulations, you're back where you started. Maybe you have another teammate, but I guess Anthony Davis was the only one that didn't really have a teammate, except he had Boogie Cousins, but obviously he was out. So Damian Lillard has all-star caliber teammates. Maybe they're not all-stars, but they're at that caliber at least.
Mm-hmm. So would you still consider Anthony Davis on that same level of Damian Lillard? I mean, he made the playoffs last year, but that was largely due to the fact that he had DeMarcus for a majority of the season. Other than that, he's been lottery bound.
Yeah, no, I guess I'd put him below that.
Like with Kemba Walker.
No, I put him above that purely because he's Anthony Davis. He's a top 5 player in the league.
Yeah, true.
And so he has the ability to put a team on his back and carry them. He's been, because I mean a lot of his years he's been injury prone, and so when he's out for the Pelicans, that's an L. That's an L for them. So he has the ability to carry them, but it just doesn't always work out for him to make it to the playoffs. But I would not be mad at him though. I guess it'd be different for him because obviously he's doing it right now because they haven't brought any help for him. They haven't tried to bring any help for him. At least with those other teams, with like the losing teams, they've tried to bring some help. Bradley Beals in Washington, DeAndre Ayton was drafted specifically to help the Suns. So I guess it's all situation based.
Mm-hmm. So when did this this disloyalty from a player standpoint, when do you think it kind of started? I kind of relate it back to just when LeBron left Cleveland for the first time to go to Miami. I think that, at least in my life, is the first time I was like, wow, look at this player, just openly leaving his team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's big. I would say for players, that's the first one I can think of. It's happened before that, obviously, but in our generation,
that's
the biggest
understanding.
Yeah, that's the biggest one I can think of is when, Miami, a lot of people point to is the start of the modern era super team format, where you get stars together and you bring them to a central location to make a team that's unbeatable, even though they were beatable back then. So, yeah, I mean, LeBron's move from Cleveland to Miami was just really big because he was the heart and soul in Cleveland, and for me that move was interesting because looking back on it, obviously I was too young to care about analytics back then, anything like that, but he was still young. He was still really young on a team that could have made something of him. Well, they were trying to, obviously, but it was just I think it was a business decision as well, which was really smart on his part. So that one's really big. I mean, obviously, I think more modern, I think of Kevin Durant going to the Warriors. That's the biggest one. To me, that's the biggest one. LeBron is like the start of it, but the biggest one in the past decade is Kevin Durant going to the Warriors. That one, you joke about it. You woke up and said, "Oh, the NBA has been ruined" when you saw that, and so that one is the immediate one in my mind.
Yeah, because if we starting from LeBron, we have things like we have Chris Paul wanting to leave the Clippers. We have Kawhi Leonard's whole ordeal. Paul George, Anthony Davis recently, LeBron twice, the KD one. Just a lot of players that are just kind of through with the team they're with and they want to leave. Do you think there's a good way to leave a team when you're a star of that caliber? Because obviously, like, if Evan Turner was like, all right, Portland, I'm done, like, I'd be like, okay, see ya.
Yeah.
Thanks for getting rid of that horrible contract. But like,
well, all love to Evan Turner though. He's been doing really good for us recently. So all love to Evan Turner.
But for like those star players, is there a good way to leave a team?
Yeah, there definitely is. Good is a loose term I would use. It's not really a great way to leave a team. And there's no way you can leave a team without leaving fans kind of sad. Mm-hmm. I think what it comes down to is how you make it publicly known that you want to leave a team. The best way to do it is to go in the free agency. Requesting a trade is immediately a tough thing. So the best thing to do, I think, is just to wait till you're a free agent. But some players aren't in that position. Some players want to go because they're young, or maybe they're getting to the end of their prime and they need to make business decisions to win. So I would compare it, like Anthony Davis and his public request to be traded, all of that. That was moderately negative. Could have been better if he had just kept it private. And
yeah, that was just terrible.
Yeah, I kept it private and just kept it private and then respected the Pelicans. This team has been good for you. They've been paying you. Tell them you want to trade, but keep playing. Keep the fans happy. Don't be that. Don't be such like a, I don't know. Don't be so mad at a team that they're not winning that you won out immediately. That's what happened with him. He just won it out immediately.
Yeah.
Like, out of nowhere, he won it out. And then what's even worse, I think, is the Jimmy Butler incident where he was just being...
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah. It was belligerence. It was complete disrespect on a team's name. Now, you can say all you want that there were other things going on the team's part, which I agree. There were things like that. But you are also a player who has a more central face than a team. A team has a big scope, but as a player, it's just you. You're representing yourself, and so you gotta be careful when you do that.
Yeah, and I think obviously a lot of fans aren't that understanding, but I think at least hopefully a majority would be if it's like presented in a situation that's respectful. Like if Damian Lillard came out and he said, "Portland, I love you. I've given these last 7 years, I've given you everything I have, but I really feel it's best for me to move on." I wouldn't hate Damian Lillard because he's done so much for Portland. He's made our franchise, while I think we haven't been as successful as we could have been, he's made us relevant and he's been a great player. And I would have no hatred towards him if he left. Something like that. Just like how I think Suns fans shouldn't have any hatred towards Devin Booker if he wanted to leave. Because I think that dude's won maybe like the most is like maybe 20 games in a season in his career. Like that's just terrible.
Yeah, it's rough. Yeah, that works for me. I think the requesting the trade adds a little bit of insult if you do it, because requesting a trade is saying I'm not willing to finish my contract with you guys. I just
want out now.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of insult, but again, that's just it. You have to understand where they're coming from. When I think of a good player who left a team respectfully, I think of Gordon Hayward. Free agency, he had a lot of decisions to make. And he chose the Celtics over re-signing with the Jazz, and that was that was the movement from a good team to hopefully to what he saw as a great team, and he did it very respectfully. He released a thing on the Players Tribune, I think, where he just pretty much wrote something, and he thanked Utah, and
and obviously there was still a lot of hate directed towards him.
Yeah, but that's going to come with anything, and you move from any team, there are going to be fans that are angry. But I'm pretty sure the majority of fans were like, that sucks, but it happens. It's a business.
Yeah, and I think it's the worst fans that are the most vocal, right? And so the people who are representing the fan base are those who are pretty much the worst because they're the most vocal, they're the most willing to talk. And so I think kind of the conclusion with the player standpoint is, if a team fails their player, if the player has been giving everything and he still hasn't been able to succeed, I think a team has to respect the right of that player if it's done respectably, right? If he's respectful, I think a team has to honor that.
Yeah, I agree completely.
So now loyalty from a team's perspective, right? There's all these players like, man, KD's a snake. Now let's talk about how teams are disrespectful. So a team's goal is to win, right? That's what the owner wants. That's what they get paid to do. So if a player is not contributing to that team, I think we've kind of come to the consensus that the team has the right to change things up.
Right, and I think it goes back to what I said a little bit before. You have the face of a player versus the face of a team. There's nobody you can target in a team. People will obviously use like the coach or the GM as scapegoats, but the team has so many more people with so many more decisions being made that's not quite as emotional reaction to a team being unloyal than a player being unloyal. So a team like you said is the business side of the NBA. They have to make decisions based on 5-6 different facets that they have to factor in. So wins, who can bring in money, who can be the face of a franchise, who's producing, everything like that. They factor all that in, and if you're failing too much on one idea, then yeah, they have the right to trade you, and they just might.
So if we look at these are just three bigger examples of where teams have been considered unloyal. The biggest one in recent memory, DeMar DeRozan. Obviously, he gave everything to that Toronto franchise. Gets traded for Kawhi Leonard. Talking about that one, I mean, Toronto was in a slump, right? They were the best team in the East. They were better than Cleveland for the last 4 years of LeBron's, for 3 or 4 years of LeBron's reign, but they could never beat him, right? Second round exits to him, conference finals. And so I think at that point, it does suck, like that DeRozan had to leave, but in the end, it's a business. And the team knew if they can get Kawhi Leonard, you have to go for that.
Yeah, I think that comes down to the rejuvenation idea for a team. They were good, they were great, and they could have continued to be great, but they would have continued to also potentially be second round Eastern Conference exits to the Cavs, even with LeBron. And so even with LeBron likely leaving, now then they'd have to face other teams like the rising 76ers and stuff like that. And so for them, I think it was, not only did they trade DeRozan, but they fired Dwayne Casey. And so that was a rejuvenation for them. They saw their team had flatlined at greatness, which is kind of weird to say, but they flatlined as a great team that might not be able to go any higher. And so to be the best team. And so for them, I think it was a gamble to, like you said, take Kawhi Leonard and hope that he can push it or rejuvenate the team to do better. And so, because this is his contract year, so that this is a very big gamble for them. It was huge because DeMar DeRozan would have re-signed. He would have re-signed in an instant. He would have.
He's not going anywhere. He wants to win the ring for him, right?
Yeah. So he would have. He would have been there to the very end. So that was tough for them. I know that had to be tough for them to make that decision.
Yeah. So another example. This is an example where I think it was right idea in mind, but just terrible execution. The Blake Griffin trade. So kind of to give it some foundation, the Clippers obviously do this whole thing of like, Blake, we love you. You are everything. They get him to sign this gigantic contract, and then they trade him to Detroit.
Yeah.
And I mean, really, Chris Paul was leaving, DeAndre Jordan and all that. I think, honestly, they were ready to embrace that rebuild, and they didn't want to keep Blake on a losing team, and so they were willing to let him go, but they weren't willing to let him go for nothing. And so they convinced him to sign. That way they could trade him instead of just losing him in the free agency. And I think that's where they went wrong.
I think that's where they went right. They did the same thing with Chris Paul. They had him sign they did a sign and trade. I think it was respect for both of them. I think
Detroit wasn't a sign and trade though.
It wasn't?
No, Houston was a sign and trade where it's like, we'll sign Chris Paul, then trade him to you. Detroit was, hey, sign with us. You're the future. Let's take you into the Staples Center and put up and pretend we're hanging your jersey up, and then let's trade you to Detroit and lock you there for 5 years without you even knowing you were going there.
Right. I think it is difficult, but at least he got the big contract with the Clippers. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if they knew they were going to trade him, they could have just signed him to a smaller contract and been like they could have been like, hey, you know, we want to keep you. You're going to be a franchise player, but we're not going to offer you as much so we can make room for a bigger player. They could have tricked him. They could have absolutely just tricked him and been like, you know, we're going to sign you for less, and then traded him. But they didn't. They signed him for a massive contract and then traded him, and he got to keep that money. So I don't think it's too bad of a deal for Blake Griffin.
Yeah, I mean, the money's nice, but obviously he was expecting 5 years in LA, not 5 years in Detroit, Michigan.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, he's still succeeding. He's still doing fine. Blake Griffin isn't the caliber player that I would be. I don't think he's at the same level as some players we talked about. And I think Blake Griffin's fantastic, but I don't think he is that much of a franchise player, to be honest. I don't think his trade is as big of a deal as like not Paul George, but Chris Paul's trade. I'm a fan of Blake Griffin.
Well, we know my thoughts. We know my thoughts on Chris Paul.
I mean, yeah, of course. But yeah, that trade's different for me, I think.
So here's one that I think you'll be very passionate about. Isaiah Thomas trade. So obviously,
Which one?
So the Celtics. So obviously, Isaiah Thomas becomes the face of this Celtics rebuild. They get that ring in 2008, and then they're just hot garbage. And Isaiah Thomas really turns that franchise around. He has an MVP caliber season, All-Star, All-NBA, great season. He destroys his hip. He plays through the death of his sister to like force the Celtics to the conference finals. And in the end, he gets traded to Cleveland for Kyrie Irving. So if we think about this in the same context as the DeMar DeRozan one, it's flipping one player for a better player to advance your team over the hump.
Mm-hmm. I think there was sneakiness on the part of the Celtics on that trade. I think there was recognizing the injury and being like, maybe we don't want to pursue this any further. Seeing his trade stock rise with that season and capitalizing on it. Because I'm not going to say that because we still have yet to see if he can come back and be great again. But that was a breakout season where he did exceptionally well. I mean, stupid good. And I think it was the Celtics who knew him very well because he was their player, realizing that with the injury and looking to the future, he might not be the best one to keep forever. You know, he's how tall is he? 5'4"?
5'9".
5'4" point. He's 5'9". I thought he was shorter than that. I thought he was a little guy. That's still little. I mean,
he's still little, but he's not Earl Boykins.
No, he's not Muggsy Bogues. I mean, he's a 5'9" point guard who I'm not going to say he's easily defendable because obviously he was saucing fools.
Yeah, but he's a liability on defense.
He's a liability on defense. That hip injury, I think they knew the severity of it better than any other team and didn't really want anybody else to know that it might be really bad. Mm-hmm. And so for them, especially with Jaylen Brown and Jason, they got Jason Tatum that year, right? Or was that? Did they already have him at that point?
That was at the end of that year they drafted him.
Yeah, and so with that pick on the horizon, they said we need to make a decision. Do we trade him and bolster our team, or do we have faith in him? And actually, that's going to go into my topic later about injuries and teams having faith in their players or not. But I think they made it when they saw that Kyrie Irving was shopping, that he wanted to be traded. They saw the weakness of the Cavaliers, and they just said, "Hey, here's a really great player, and by the way, he has a hip injury." And they just kind of slid that underneath, and the Cavaliers took the bait, which was, I think, it looked like a great trade, but that was a garbage trade for the Cavaliers.
Yeah, and so if we flip this around, if we think about teams being loyal, you have when Kobe, ruptured his Achilles, what happens? The Lakers sign him to a $50 million contract.
Right.
The Cleveland-Miami trade to get Dwayne Wade back on the Heat for basically nothing. I feel like it was just cash, maybe a second rounder. Those are the things where you're like, that's loyalty, right? That's two organizations, understanding, this is where this player needs to be. This is where he belongs. or like this is a player that's special to us. Like Kobe, even though you're 30-something and your Achilles is gone, it just disappeared, we're still going to sign you. We're still going to lock you up. Like that's the loyalty that's kind of on the other side of it, I guess.
Well, that's also resume-based. At that point, Kobe had an absolute great resume. He had won rings for the Lakers. He was their franchise face, and so they weren't going to let him go. They were going to sign him to keep him out of respect for that. Same with Dwayne Wade. He had the resume with the Heat as one of their best players in history. He had won three rings with them at that point, only with them, never with another team. And so those kind of players have already cemented themselves in your legacy, and those are also the kind of players that when they retire, they bring in more views. They bring in people. And as long as you can keep them, Miami home games, even though they're the 10th seed right now, I can guarantee you there's still people are attending those games just to see Dwayne Wade. Same with Kobe in his last season. People, I guarantee you, were flocking to Lakers games to see Kobe play one more time. And so that business mindset is also right there, that you don't want to lose that player so that way you can make money on their final season.
Yeah. I think it's just kind of hard to talk about resume, especially since, we're saying that we're signing these players just out of respect for who they are. But yeah, I just think it's kind of difficult because obviously DeMar DeRozan had a resume with the Raptors. Obviously Blake Griffin had a huge resume with the Clippers. He turned that franchise around. They were a horrible squad.
But the difference between those two teams is it's not the same resume.
I'm not going to say Blake Griffin's Kobe Bryant, but I'm also going to say like Blake Griffin wasn't a 33-year-old who tore his Achilles.
I know, but the same factor, like it outweighs it. It outweighs the fact that happened. Blake Griffin didn't do anything substantial for the Clippers. They were second round. Did they make it to the Western Conference ever with that team?
No,
and so they were just not. He didn't have, obviously whatever he was doing with that team wasn't enough for them to count him as a good resume. Sure, they're great players, but if you're gonna like Kobe, the impact he made on the Lakers is overshadowed by everything when it comes to that. Same with Dwayne Wade. They wouldn't have won those rings without those two guys. And so that's where that respect comes from.
Yeah. I just hated Kobe Bryant's farewell season. It was just awful. The last 2 years he was on the Lakers were the worst 2 years of my life.
Those Lakers also knew that they were done. They recognized
so bad.
They recognized that. And so at that point it did become, we're going to respect Kobe and we're going to make money off of Kobe. His jersey had to sell better than it did on previous years in his final season. As a business, as a franchise, they recognized that they were struggling now, that Kobe wasn't going to lead them. And so they were like, you know what? That's okay. We're fine with that. Kobe, we're going to make money off of you, because they had Kobe freaking Bryant on their team, and you can still make money even when he's hobbling down the court with a cane. So that, it's different for when you have players like Kobe. LeBron James' final season, whatever team he's on, whether he goes back to Cleveland or he stays in the Lakers, that team is gonna make mondo money, dude.
It's
gonna
make
crazy. So much cash if he doesn't get traded.
Oh, he no. That's for later. So kind of to wrap up this point, who do you think gets kind of the short end of the stick when these situations happen? Do you think players or the teams get kind of attacked more for disloyalty?
Oh, it's players, 100%. Because who are you going to attack on a team? The GM, the owner? You don't know who made that decision. You don't know who's making those calls. Obviously, the GM is going to process the idea, but the players, you're a face. It's just you. I'll go back to that again. It's just you. You have your face, and when you request a trade or leave a team, people are only going to look at you. Even if you have an agent, they don't care. People don't care. They look at you as you're the one who made the decision. It was all you, and it's your fault for leaving my team. How could you do this? How could you want to pursue a better team and actually make something of your career, Devin Booker? How dare you? Even though we've won 7 games, how dare you leave to join a team that might get 40-plus wins in a year? How dare you?
He might actually not be the 10th seed. Or actually, no, that would be lucky. if he was ever 10th in a conference.
If the Suns ever get above the 10th seed, I will. I don't know what I'll do, but
dude, if they get 30 wins, I mean, would be insane. So I think
hot garbage.
Yeah, I agree with you that the players are attacked a lot more. Kind of just to wrap up. So I think we kind of understand that loyalty, obviously it's important, but I do think it is built upon mutually beneficial interactions, right?
Right.
A player who's not contributing, unless you know they have that Hall of Fame legacy, like they have contributed, a player who isn't contributing or a team that is failing to get over the hump, I think at that point, that's where you have to do what you need to do. If a player feels the team isn't going to get over the hump and they want to leave, they deserve to do that. If a team feels that this player isn't helping them get over the hump, they deserve to get rid of that player. It's a business.
It's a business. I mean, that's all it comes down to. So I agree. But are you good to
I'm good.
My topic? All right.
Let's
So
go.
this goes right into my topic. I've titled this topic, The Road to Recovery, the Struggle Mentality, and Strength Needed. Now, this was meant to be last week, but we kind of went along on time. But I still think it's relevant, extremely relevant to right now, and to what you just talked about, because injuries are part of the NBA. We know that injuries are part of the game. When you think about it, there are 82 games in a season, and whether or not you think that's too little or too much, the natural human body, I don't think is really meant to play. Now, I'm not even. I mean, you know more about medical stuff than I do because that's what you pursue. But I think just logic based, the body isn't meant to go 82 games in a season. Just pushing yourself as often as they do. Now obviously the fact that they have gyms and they push their bodies, it makes it easier on them. But when you play 10 to 20 years of just constant abuse in your body, of a physical game, of working out, your body responds to that. And every player gets that. Every player has a chronic injury. Every player has something that continues to come up. Now, some players it's worse, and that happens. But I want to talk about injuries in general. Now, if you look at the Bleacher Report, actually I don't think it's Bleacher Report, I think it's CBS that does it. The CBS injury report that is up right now. I mean, teams, obviously it's the end of the season, so teams are resting players. But at the end of the season, I think is when you see the most injuries taking place because players are finally giving up. Players that aren't going to make the playoffs, they're taking them out. They're saying, okay, your injury's too much. But I mean, you look at, let's see, Chicago has, now you might say they're resting them because it's the end of the season. But I mean, Zach LaVine with a thigh injury, Chris Dunn with a back injury, Otto Porter with a shoulder injury, Lauri Markkanen with an illness, Wendell Carter Jr. with a thumb injury. I mean, there's just so many injuries that can happen to a player that are either real or fake. You decide, but it happens so often. So I want to talk about that a little bit. So I've broken down injuries into 4 areas: chronic, season-ending, unpredicted season-ending, and career-ending. So to start is what we talked about a little bit already, chronic injuries. Now, for most people who don't know most people know what chronic means, but for those of you who don't know what chronic means, chronic is pretty much an injury that keeps happening. It is continuous. Every season it might pop up. It takes players out pretty constantly. Ezra, who comes to mind when you think of a player in game right now who has a chronic injury that, or maybe even before, maybe over the past couple of years, who is a player that had a chronic injury as long as you can remember?
I would say, the first 2 that come to my mind are Brandon Roy for Portland, just with his knees and his legs, and Greg Oden. Obviously, we're Portland fans, so we're very experienced.
Right, but would you call that chronic? I wouldn't call that chronic. When I say chronic, I mean a player that is still that continues to play, because in the end, Brandon Roy was done. Greg Oden never played. When I mean chronic, I mean a player that has a career, but throughout a large part of their career, they have an injury that is always on them. I wrote down Chris Paul, I wrote down Derrick Rose, and he obviously he's borderline because you could have called I put him in season ending as well. But along with that, Derrick Rose has also been a chronic player. So Who else? Who can you think of right now? Maybe this season or the past couple that was just out over and over again.
Anthony Davis. I mean, he only plays around 60 games a season.
Right.
So I think about Anthony Davis. Joel Embiid. I think about because I mean it took him 3 years just to be able to play like back-to-backs.
Right.
Let's see. I don't know if I'd say Blake Griffin now. Clippers Blake Griffin was out every season in the playoffs.
I have that written down. I have Clippers
Yeah.
Blake Griffin written down as one of my ones. I also have Kevin Love put down. Kevin Love is a pretty chronic injury player. It's like every other season he has an injury. It's like one season he'll play 70 games, 70-plus games, and the next season he'll play only like 50-plus games. It's back and forth. Now, a chronic is typically a weak muscle or joint injury. You know, your knees, your ankles, your shoulder. You know, it's always a lot of times it's the knee. The knee is always a weak spot for players. So it's typically something that just happens. It's just the fact that they play for so long or they play so physically that a part of their body is just weaker than it used to be. So next, I want to move on to season ending. So same idea. When it comes to season-ending injuries, I mean, I'm talking about players that not like a compound fracture, but players that their injuries just took them out. It said, we're done. Like, it's just the idea that a chronic injury went so far to take a player out. I have Lonzo Ball put down right now because his injury was pretty chronic throughout the season, and then at the end they were just like, we're done. We're taking him out. He can't take it anymore. So who else do you think of when it comes to season ending?
So are we not thinking of just like random spontaneous injuries that just happened?
No, that's next.
So like not like Kevin Durant's thing where he was out that
No.
one season. All right, so people who just get injured enough where they just call it around 20 games left. That's tough.
I have Porzingis put down because his was not, it wasn't like Porzingis fell and his leg exploded. It was just the fact that his injuries were pretty constant, and then it was done. It was just like we got to take him out. He's got to go through therapy. We got to do surgery on this. It was a decision. It was a decision made when he was playing for the Knicks that has now.
Well, I mean, he also tore his Achilles though. That's not one where you just kind of eyeball it. You're out if that happens.
I mean, fair.
You don't play with that.
That's fair.
I think of John Wall. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
of course, this season was his I tore my Achilles, but then he also fell down.
Right. Yeah. I think it's a tough one to diagnose, but let's go on to the one that we all think about: unpredicted season-ending injuries. Right now, obviously, Nurkic is the big one.
Nurkic.
So, who else do you think of?
You have the Paul George one. Always remember that. Gordon Hayward last season.
Yep.
Kevin Durant. It was a while ago, but I still remember it because I remember that was the year I selected Anthony Davis first in the draft, and then my friend selected KD second, and then KD went out for the season.
Yeah, that was the year I traded KD at the end. I traded for KD at the end of the season to our buddy Brown. I traded KD. I was losing, so I wanted to help him. No, I wanted to help him. So I was like, here's my best player for KD. I have Sean Livingston put down.
Oh,
His was pretty rough.
That one could be originally considered. That was supposed to be career-ending.
Career-ending, right? And then,
DeMarcus Cousins.
DeMarcus Cousins, that's a good one. I have Andrew Bogut. I don't know if you ever saw that injury.
I didn't see it.
Not a superstar, but that's a bad one. I think it was his elbow. Pretty much just like it was bad. And then I have career-ending, which you've already mentioned too. Brandon Roy, Greg Oden, very close to our hearts. Sam Bowie is another one.
Sam Bowie.
Yeah. It's players whose injuries got the best of them. I don't want to say got the best of them because that makes it sound like they were weak, but it's the fact that their injuries were too much. So who else comes to mind for injuries being too much?
Injuries being too much.
I have Yao Ming put down.
Oh, yeah.
Great player who
all the big men in the world.
All the big men in the world. Steve Nash. Injuries, I think, got the best of him.
Tracy McGrady.
Still great. Tracy McGrady. And I have Derrick Rose with an asterisk because
he's come back.
Derrick Rose he's coming back, but he's been hot. After his 2011 injury, it's been up and down for him. Some seasons he'll play. I think when he was with the Cavs season, he played 20 games, I think. But I just wanted to run through that because it goes into what I'm talking about next. So when a player has a chronic injury, what as a team do you think is the best thing to do? Like, what does a player have to do to be kept by a team? Because if a player continues to get injured, playing 40-plus games, 50-plus games a season, what do you think that the team's response to that is?
I mean, a team's response, I would hope, I mean, as bad as it is, would be to get rid of that player.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, obviously you can't do that. So then I think it's a player's responsibility to accept a pay cut. Because these are typically the players where this matters. Like if some role player chronically gets injured, goodbye. Typically these are all-star caliber players. I mean, if they're going to demand huge salaries, and if a team's going to fork over $30 million a year for 50 games of a guy, like that's not worth it.
So when you're that team and that player, how much do you think a chronic injury damages a player's stock, their ability to be traded, what they're worth? How much do you think it damages it?
I think it depends on the player, right? Because Anthony Davis obviously can get anything he wants. Even though he doesn't play that much, he's a top 5 player, so he's going to get whatever. But I think like a player like Kristaps, obviously, where you don't know. You don't know if he's going to be the same player. Or like DeMarcus Cousins, you don't know if he's going to be the same player. Those are players where it's harder to gauge what they're worth.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. So, in terms of that, let's say you're a coach, right? You have this player who's great, but he had a chronic injury. He's healthy after missing 10 games. How do you? I was going to ask you, how do you play that player? How do you work with a player who could get injured any game, but is also a star? How do you factor that in? Do you play them less if your team needs to win? Do you play them? Do you just hope they don't get injured and you play them more? Do you think you have to factor in injuries when you're a coach?
Yeah, I think it's super important, especially at this point in the season. We see a lot of coaches kind of thinking how they're gonna still win, but not hurt their players before the playoffs. I think you have to play them less, and I don't know. I'm just a huge advocate for playing star players against second unit guys. Like if you can play them against players who aren't going to put up as big a fight, then they're not going to have to exert themselves that much. So if you play them like 30 minutes a game, and you still start them, but you kind of alter their minutes to where they're more of the second unit player, I think that helps. I think you take extreme caution in games where they're going to be playing against physical players. Like if you're the Pelicans, don't play Anthony Davis so much when you know it's probably going to be Draymond running up against him and hammering into him. Or a player like Joel Embiid, You kind of got to be careful with these players who are known to be physical because they're not going to go out and intentionally try to hurt them, but that's just how they play.
Right. And then my last question for this chronic section is an injured star worth more than a healthy role player?
Ooh. That's a good question.
It's a tough one. And I bring it to take a look at Derrick Rose's stats. You have this guy who, going back to Chicago, the Chicago era, Derrick Rose, his MVP season, he had 25 points per game, 7 assists, or almost 8 assists. And then he has his injury in 2011-2012 when he plays 40 games, then only 10 games in 2014. And then 2014-2015 plays 51, 2015-2016 plays 66, and then goes to the Knicks. I don't know if you remember that, but Derrick Rose was actually on the Knicks for a while. I forgot about that. But say you're 2015-2016 Bulls. You are struggling, first of all. You're not doing fantastic. You have Derrick Rose, who was your MVP only 5 seasons before that. He's not doing too bad. He's still scoring 17 points per game with 5 assists, putting up point guard numbers. Do you think they should have kept him? Do you think you trade for role players? Do you try to get a star out of it? I mean, he's obviously been injured at that point. His stock has dropped, like we talked about. So what do you do as a team at that point?
This almost comes down to the loyalty aspect because obviously Derrick Rose is the Chicago kid. He's the heart and soul of that franchise. I don't think there's a single Bulls player now that exists that would ever talk badly about Derrick Rose because they just love him. But I mean, yeah, obviously you need to part ways with him. You know that he's not the same player and he never will be. The injuries he had are the ones that don't go away. Like you said, they're chronic. And I think at that point, I don't know what his efficiency ratings were or wins added or anything like that, but I think, you're probably better off with 2 blue chip players. But then again, I don't think you get that for him. I think other teams were aware of this too. It's this hard medium where it's like, how can I get rid of this player before teams know how bad it is? With the Isaiah Thomas thing.
So then going a little bit further into that from Derrick Rose's point of view, right? 2015-2016, Derrick Rose was still the starter. For all the 66 games he played, he was still the starter. And going into the Knicks, he was still their starter again. For all 64 games he played, he started. But he went down both years in points scored. And as a player, when does it get to the point when you have to say, my injury makes me no longer a star? How do you think they get to that point? Is it something that you... Do you do it for the team? Do you do it for yourself? Because now he's a bench player. Now Derrick Rose is a bench player, playing for the Timberwolves, doing very well. He's having a very good season for himself, a comeback season, many say. But he's only started 13 games out of the 51 he's played. And he's out now. He's out. But regardless, do you think at some point when you are a chronically injured player, do you continue to pursue greatness and hope that you're going to be healthy again? Or is it smarter to take a bench role and to just be good on the bench?
I think it's good to be on the bench, but I think that has to come from the team. I think the team has to put you on the bench. I feel like the player always needs to be thinking like, I should be starting. I'm going to prove it to them. I can be healthy. I can be as great as I was. I think a player always needs to have that mindset because that's the biggest thing with injuries is the mental aspect of it.
Exactly. I feel the same way. I feel like it has to come down to the team, but the player should be hungry to get out there. So that goes into my next thing where I want to talk about the unpredicted injuries, the leg fractures, the elbow fractures, things that happen, your Achilles, things that you don't expect to happen that just happen.
Yeah.
This is a big question. This is a very heavy question. But how do players deal with that mentally? What do you think is a mindset that a player can take that is good? Because a lot of times, that happens and you're out for an entire season, you're injured. It's tough to come back from that. Gordon Hayward himself, in an interview with the Athletic is where I got it from, is he said that I won't be the same player when talking about his return. Now, he continued with that he will still be great, or he'll still do good, and he could even be better. Like, he's not saying that he's going to be bad from that point on. But he is saying that an injury of the magnitude that he had and that many other players have, it has a permanent impact on them. So what do you think goes into the mentality of returning from an injury like that?
I think first off, it's really important that these players, find someone to talk to. Obviously, they're in a brotherhood. There's hundreds of other players who have experienced the same thing. So I think it's important to find that foundation of players who have been through the same thing. And I think it's important to kind of get that mindset that Gordon Hayward had of, I'm going to be a different player. I'm not going to be worse, but I'm just going to play differently. And I think they need to approach it. They need to be willing to accept change. Maybe it's like, all right, I'm not going to be that slasher I was. So now I think I'm going to develop my 3-point game. I'm going to work on my ball handling so I can create more space off the shot. I think they need to be willing to adapt their play style, but not settle and think that they're going to be a worse player because of it.
Exactly. I think it comes down to whatever problems stem from your injury, don't try to get rid of them. Try to embrace them and work through them, because Gordon Hayward, his injury was on a drive. It was on a hard drive to go for a dunk that he fell on his ankle and broke it. And if you look at his play nowadays, even when I'm watching him, it makes me nervous when he drives. And I'm sure he has the same thing. There's a part of him, because of that injury, that's probably afraid to drive a little bit. It's probably afraid to take it to the hoop. Especially with that ankle injury, he probably doesn't have the same hops he used to. It's different. But I think a lot of players who still do well, they do well after injuries because they embrace the injury. They take that injury and they say, much like what you just said, they say, okay, maybe I'm not going to be as hoppy as I used to. Maybe I'm not going to drive as much as I used to, but I'm going to shoot better. I'm going to be stronger on the post up. I'm going to be somebody different. I'm going to continue to pursue my game. But going into that even further, comeback season for players. Look at Gordon Hayward. He's played 71 games this year, but he's only averaging 11 points and 4 rebounds, which is significantly worse than his last Jazz season. So you're a player coming off a bad injury. You come back into the game with high hopes, and you start to underperform. He's a bench player now. He's playing off the bench. What do? How mentally can you think that a player? Do you think they just keep pursuing it? They keep grinding it out. Do you think that it's just a grindy thing that they just need to keep playing, or do you think they need to take a step back and go back to the drawing board and look at what they're doing?
Well, first off, I think the Boston Celtics situation, it's one of the weirdest situations to be in basketball, I feel. It's just a weird team to me for star or rookie. But I think he just needs, he needed to be accepting of this because obviously you can't expect to come back out and just average 20 points a game. Right. The rigors of an 82-game season, you're not in the shape that you were, especially with a leg injury where you can't move. Like we saw all those videos of him, stuck in shooting while sitting down. You can't walk. And so, especially for Gordon Hayward, the dude, he was a slasher. He's this white guy, but he was a drive it, take it to the hoop kind of guy. That was his play style. And and so it's hard. I just think players, they can't expect to be great that first season. I think they need to give themselves some time to readjust and to, they have to trust their legs again, right? He has to trust, I'm going to jump and I'm going to land and I'm going to be fine. And that probably takes months.
Do you think the Celtics put too much on him on his return then? Do you think the Celtics should have started him slower?
I wouldn't say there was any pressure intentionally placed upon him, but I think it's just there because of all the hype that was surrounding it. It's like, here's the big signing. Oh no, he's down on the first game. Like, our season's over. It's ruined. He's doomed us. And then he comes back and I think everyone was anticipating, Utah Jazz Gordon Hayward. Mm-hmm. And then when that doesn't happen, then I think pressure comes and everyone's like, well, why do we even have him? We should just trade him. Like, everyone starts to freak out. People start to overreact.
So do you trade him? As a team, you have a player that got injured. He's not doing as well, but he still has a high stock. Gordon Hayward still has a high trade value because of his previous numbers. So as a team, do you wait it out or do you trade him?
I think with a point like that, you can't trade him because I just think loyalty or not, that would destroy your franchise. Mm-hmm. If you show that much kind of just abandonment of a player that you sign, you're like, we need you. He gets injured, and then you just kind of give up on. I don't think you can give up that soon.
I agree. I think a big person that falls on is the coach. I think the coach has to recognize that injury, recognize the struggling player, and appropriately put him into the game where he can be effective still. And I think what's his name? Brad Stevens. I think Brad Stevens has done exceptional with that in keeping Gordon Hayward playing consistently, but not putting everything on him. If Gordon Hayward had came back and not gotten injured, had came to Boston and still had a Utah Jazz kind of season, I think there'd be a lot more weight on him right now. I think he would be probably like the second scoring option outside of Kyrie maybe. So I think he's doing it really well, and I think next season, I think Gordon Hayward can do really well next season, and I think it's going to be the telling season if whether or not this injury is something permanent on him, whether or not he can come back.
Yeah.
So
go
ahead.
I think I like the idea of kind of like a 2-year window almost. Mm-hmm. Especially in a case where you miss an entire season, because some players miss halfway through the season and it's only like a 3-month injury, but they're out for the rest of the season. I think in a case like Gordon Hayward, you have to give him that season to get back, get on his feet, get used to it. And then I think the season after that, I think that one's go time. And it's like, all right, you're back. Let's do this.
Exactly. I feel the same way. I feel like as a team, you can't lose faith. And I think if you were to trade them, that would have a significant impact on all players in the team. First of all, recognizing that as a team, you're willing to just trade somebody because they got injured. And I feel like that'd be a horrible move for the charisma and the chemistry of your team. So that's all I really got when it comes down to injuries. I had one more question. It's just kind of out of the blue. But when it comes to young injured players, do you think that you trade them before any real problem arises, or do you pray that they get healthy? So
this is a 76ers approach?
Exactly. Do you think players who maybe were injured in college, do you think they're worth the gamble? Or would you rather have a healthy player that maybe is not quite as good?
I think with young players, I think it's important. You take the gamble. I mean, obviously that's what happened with Kyrie Irving. He broke his foot at Duke, but he was still the number one pick, and he's been great. He's a great player. It depends on the severity, but it does come down to the player. You know, you got to look at that player and you have to think, all right, is this the type of player that I feel is strong enough mentally to overcome this? Is this the type of player who is going to work harder than anybody else, even if their foot's broken, you know, something like that? And so a lot of it comes down to just the mental state of the young player. And obviously with Markelle Fultz, it was handled so weirdly. We had no idea what was going on. Markelle Fultz wasn't talking, and I think at that point, when it gets weird like that, I think, yeah, let's cut ties. This is weird. Why aren't you playing? You know, what's wrong with your shoulder? Why aren't you talking to anybody? I think at that point, it's time to cut ties, especially if you're a contending team and you know you're fine without a rookie point guard.
Yeah, I think it's very case by case specific, and I agree. I think it really comes down to, because if you're a non-contending team with a point guard, say you have like a Markelle Fultz, say he went to the Suns for some reason, okay, and yeah, I would love how we always choose the Suns as the bad team, and he's injured for 2 seasons. I think you still keep that player. You still take the gamble at that point because he could still come and do something for your team, and something is better than nothing. But when you're 76ers and you're a competing team and you can get something maybe better out of a player than nothing, you do it. You make the trade.
Yeah, I mean, especially for those worse teams, the guy's on his rookie contract. He's not taking up that much cap space. You can be patient and wait. Now, if it comes time to sign him to a bigger deal, that's where it gets a little iffy.
Agreed. Well, that's all I really have on injuries. I just kind of wanted to get your idea on injured players and how to approach them and how players might approach it, because it's a pretty big thing in the NBA. You know, players get injured. You look at Isaiah Thomas, who is just now coming back, or Gordon Hayward, who's struggling, and injuries will always be prevalent in the NBA. But I think it's kind of the part of the NBA that makes it so physical and makes it that's why it's a sport. You know, that's why it's such a great thing, because players can get injured, be gone for 2 seasons, and then come back and still be great and surprise people. Or maybe they get injured and they just don't come back. And so it's a tough thing, part of the sport. But thank you for giving me your opinions on it.
No, yeah, I think it was a really cool idea to talk about. You know, it's something that doesn't really get discussed too much aside from he's injured, let's trade him.
Exactly. It's kind of a forgotten thing that injuries are part of the NBA. You know, people are always like, oh, he's injured. Oh, how could this happen? You know, oh, Nurkic broke his foot. And though I feel for Nurkic and I pray for a speedy recovery, as a fan, you just kind of sit there, you get sad and you get mad, but it just happens. And you sit there and you're just kind of like, well, I mean, that's the NBA. As much as it's a business, it's also almost like a gamble. You know, every game you have the potential to get hurt. You have the potential to lose a player. That's why it's a sport. That's why it's physical. And I think people don't look at how big of an impact that injuries have on the game. But it is nice knowing that modern medicine is cutting back on that and making recovery times faster.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is that fans, I believe, and I think I'm guilty of this, we blame the player too much. Like, this player isn't telling his Achilles, all right, stay on. Don't rupture, please. Like, and if it happens, it's not the player who willed that to happen, right? And so, like, I think in my life, I've looked at Derrick Rose. I'm like, why can't he just like stay healthy? Like, he could be so good. Like, he's just a terrible player because he won't get healthy. Or like, I blame Anthony Davis. I'm like, he would be the greatest player of all time if he could play 82 games. But I mean, it's not necessarily the player's fault. You know, it's not the 7'6" Yao Ming's fault that he's got bad knees. He's a physical monster. Like, he's gonna be messed up.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think sometimes that mentality of the fans kind of pushes players to the point where they get more injured. You know, LeBron James in the last finals. Exactly. You have LeBron James in this past year, who apparently was allegedly playing through bad injuries, and then LeBron James in last year's finals, where apparently he had a hand injury. Now that was
broke his hand or something,
but that still pushed him to keep playing. And I think as fans, we have to be understanding of injuries, and we have to be careful not to push our players and our favorite players to keep playing through them. Because last thing you want is a career-ending injury or a chronic one that becomes career-ending. That's what you don't want.
Yeah. All right. So, good talking points. I really enjoyed today. So, buying or selling, I'm just going to pitch some ideas to you. You tell me whether you buy it, you agree, or you're selling it, you don't think it's true.
Okay.
Here's the first one. Paul Pierce is better than Dwayne Wade. Have you heard all this?
Don't even get that near me. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to buy all of that just so I can lay it out in front of me and take a shot on it. That is absolute blasphemy. The truth is he's not even close to Dwayne Wade. He was a great player, but Dwayne Wade is a different level. And if you want stats defensively, he's not even. Dwayne Wade I think has been one of the best defensive shooting guards we've seen in a long time.
Yeah,
obviously
he's one of the best defenders.
Yeah, obviously he's older now, but back in the day, the Flash was a lockdown defender when it came to guards. The truth, there was entire compilations of him getting mixed, getting sauced, and obviously every player gets sauced, but the truth isn't even close.
Oh, I just had to bring it up. I mean, we couldn't do this show without mentioning it. I do think though that a lot of people, at least a lot of people on the internet, are responding too quickly to this just because it's Dwayne Wade's last season and we're seeing like all these buzzer beaters.
It's defensive. Defensive. People are getting defensive over it. But I would encourage people to look into the actual stats of it.
Yeah.
And the actual efficiency in play, because obviously you look at the stats and it's like, oh, Dwayne Wade's better, by points, rebound. You can look at the stats and say that, but that doesn't mean everything. And so look at the actual reasons why Dwayne Wade is great and why he's better than that fool.
The one Paul Pierce thing I like is the one point that he's made is obviously it took the Celtics, I think 6-7 years to build a team around him. Mm-hmm. And his big thing is like, hey, if I had Shaq and LeBron, I would have won more than one ring, which I mean, you kind of have to agree with. Like, he had maybe a couple years where he had KG and Ray Allen, and that's it. That's all the Celtics really ever did for him.
I don't think so. I don't think he was a player that could have melded well with a Shaq or LeBron. I don't think he could have. Now, obviously, I don't know Paul Pierce's game that well. He's before my interest, before my generation really got into the NBA. Yeah. He was. I watched him play. Don't think I didn't. But his prime was before me, and so I'm not going to say I know Paul Pierce's game, but I do know that the type of players that play with LeBron and play with Shaq had to be specific kind of players, and I don't think he would have fit well with that.
Yeah, this is just buying or selling. We gotta chill out. Right. I'll send an email to the biggest Boston Celtics fans of all time, Ammon Brown, and see what his take is. then right. We can settle it. So to continue on, Portland currently set to face Utah, and it seems like they'll end up facing Utah in the playoffs. Portland is a first round exit.
That's a tough one. Biases would have me say that. No, I want to sell that. I want to sell that with all my heart. But when I break it down and I look at the two teams, I think I do sell more of that than I buy, even without my biases. Nurkic is a big hit to lose, but Enes Kanter, I think, fills that role very well and has been filling it enough to allow Portland to make it to the second round this year. The Utah is a great team, but it will come down to Portland's defense, whether or not they can actually play good defense against Utah, because Utah can play good defense. Utah has good defenders, and Portland can try to out-offense their defense, but if Utah is doing great defense and moderate, decent offense...
Yeah, just plays at least a little bit well.
Mm-hmm. So it's going to come down to Portland's defense and how good it can be. That's all it comes down to. So I will sell that for now.
Yeah, the biggest hit for me is just Enes Kanter's not a defender. And so, and it's just going to be interesting to watch Rudy Gobert go to town on him, baby Zach Collins, and Myers Leonard.
It's gonna be a fun series. I'll watch that one.
It'll be good.
Anticipation.
The Rockets' recent surge is overrated.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. Overrated is kind of a tough word to use. I will buy that because overall the Rockets are overrated. Now, they're sitting at 52 wins right now, and so obviously they're not completely overrated because they have that many wins, and so it's not like you can say that they're a completely overrated team. But they're set to face the Clippers right now, and I think they'll make it to the second round this year, as long as they don't face the Thunder. But yeah, I'm going to buy that. I'm going to say that they're overrated. I'm going to say that their current rise is just due to the end of season, facing teams that are sitting players, and it means nothing. It's overrated.
Cool. All right, and the last one. No matter who the Warriors face, it's either going to be San Antonio or the Thunder. It's going to take them 6 games to get to the second round.
I sell that. They face San Antonio. They'll get to the second round in 4 games. They'll sweep them.
Ooh, man, San Antonio's got one of the best home records in the NBA.
Yeah, I don't care. You're facing the Warriors. You will get swept, especially when you're a weak San Antonio team. That's just what's going to happen.
Strong
Thunder,
words.
Yes. Thunder will go to 6 games, but I don't have as much faith in San Antonio as some people do. I think it's a shaken up team, through the entire season, and then they're going to rely on. Boogie's healthy now. They're gonna put him on freaking LaMarcus Aldridge. Is he healthy? I thought Boogie was healthy, right?
He's healthy. He just has iffy games.
So, but I think they'll put him on LaMarcus Aldridge to shut him down instead of who they put in the past, Draymond Green or Kevin Durant on LaMarcus Aldridge. And then they'll put Kevin Durant or Draymond Green on DeMar DeRozan, and they're gonna. It's too easy. It's gonna be because who's gonna shut down the Splash Bros? Come on. Those guys are just gonna light up that team. I'm sorry, but the Spurs can't do it. Sold.
Whoa. And just so people know, like these points aren't my own personal beliefs. These are just points that I picked.
It's my belief.
Yeah, it's his belief. Oh, geez, that was intense. All right. Well, that's it. Thank you, everybody, for.
I've got one for you.
Oh, you got one for me.
I've got one for you. As ESPN gives me an alert right now. Here's my buy or sell for you that I thought of during this podcast.
Oh no.
In his last season, LeBron James will ask to be traded to the Cavaliers.
If he doesn't already sign with them once this Lakers deal's done, then I will buy that. LeBron James will finish his career on the Cleveland Cavaliers.
All right, that's a good one.
And then move back to LA when the season's over.
When the season's over, to become a basketball mogul.
Yeah. Oh
that
my
he isn't
gosh.
already. All right.
All right. So that's everything we have for this week. Thank you everybody for taking the time to listen to us talk about basketball. Thanks, Mom, for tuning in and leaving a like. We'll be back next week with some more ridiculous takes, as it is playoff season.
It is playoff season. Let's
I'm
go.
excited. We'll see you then, everybody.
Have a good one, guys.
Yeah. See ya.
I'm tired of it.